Welcome to Horse Pasture Weeds. I'm Jim Hillary, the Agriculture and Natural Resources Extension Agent in Loudoun County, Virginia. This is an introductory program that spotlights 17 pasture weeds. The slides and a transcript for this presentation are available upon request. This slide and the next two introduce terms that will come up later in this presentation. We'll take a moment to review them now. According to Penn State University, no matter what definition is used, weeds are plants whose undesirable qualities outweigh their good points. Some people define a weed as any plant that is growing where it's not wanted. Both descriptions are useful, for one person's rose can be another person's weed, regardless of its beauty or fragrance. As it relates to livestock and equines, if a pasture plant isn't a dietary input, then it is probably a weed. When you think about a pasture, about the only feature for keeping things out is the fencing or walls put in place to keep your animal in. Consider then that many fences and walls are selected for their aesthetic value, like wood rail or dry stone. These may be attractive, but they don't offer protection against objects like invasive grasses that spread under a fence, or wind-borne seeds that can travel through the air, or a pasture's existing seed bank that exists regardless of fencing or walls. Other weed sources are us, when we spread weeds between pastures on farm equipment or in the hay that we feed. The pasture conditions most favorable for weeds are bare open spaces with sparse growing grass in nutrient-deficient soil. Create the conditions, and weeds will come. This presentation categorizes pasture weeds by plant type, first grasses and herbs, and then further divided into life cycles, annual, biennial, and perennial. The slides identify some weeds as toxic. Plant toxicity exists on a spectrum. Some plants are highly toxic, others are not. Because toxic plants in a pasture is a program of its own, this program does not elaborate on plant toxicity. The first plant category is grasses. Foxtail, a summer annual grass. Recall an annual grass or herb completes its entire life cycle from seed to flower to seed in one season. There are multiple foxtail species. The one pictured here is large foxtail. Others common in Virginia are green foxtail and yellow foxtail. All foxtail seed heads are problematic for equine owners because if consumed during grazing, a seed can lodge in an animal's gum, forming mouth blisters. Japanese stiltgrass, a summer annual grass. It thrives in shaded areas. If you look near a wooded fence line or in areas with moist soils, you will likely find Japanese stiltgrass. By July and August, Japanese stiltgrass covers the floor of shaded areas like a carpet of lush green grass. As attractive as it may be, Japanese stiltgrass is aggressively invasive. Most horses will not graze it, but it is not toxic if they do. Jointhead arthraxen, a summer annual grass. It is low-growing with short, wide leaves with bases that encircle the stem. Jointhead is primarily a weed of pastures, hayfields, and ditches. It is highly aggressive and can, in a few years, cover many acres of pasture. Broomsedge, a perennial grass. It persists or lives for many growing seasons. The plant dies back in the winter, leaving fibrous stalks extending from the soil. Broomsedge likes low fertility areas. It is usually found in sunny, open spaces where it can be a problem in pastures and hayfields. Nimblewill, a perennial grass. It is a blue-green grass that grows in dense patches. Its stems are thin and delicate. Nimblewill resembles Bermuda grass, but is lighter green than tall fescue and Kentucky bluegrass in spring and summer. Nimblewell turns brown with the first cold weather. Herbs. Transitioning now from grasses to herbs. There are many more herb weeds than grass weeds. Chickweed, a winter annual herb whose vegetative life coincides with cool season grasses like fescue and orchard grass. It grows during the winter and produces white flowers and seed in the spring. All plant parts die by midsummer in sunny areas and lawns. Plants may persist somewhat longer in shady areas, but usually die out completely before the summer ends. There are several types of chickweed. The one pictured here is common chickweed. Marestail, a summer annual. Among its notable characteristics, marestail is a high-volume seed producer. Its seeds can be dispersed long distances by the wind. A Michigan State University study determined that as many as 125 seeds per yard were counted 400 feet away from the source plant. Moreover, marestail seed can be viable for long periods of time, sometimes decades. All parts of the marestail herb are thought to be toxic. Common cocklebur, a summer annual. It bears heart-shaped leaves and oblong, hairy burrs with prickles. Each leaf is covered with short, stiff hairs that give the plant a rough feel. Cocklebur seed and the plant are toxic, although it is unlikely equines will eat either because of their texture. Common ragweed, a summer annual. It flowers from August through October. Common ragweed can be identified by the purple color found on the underside of its cotyledons or the herb's first leaves to sprout. It prefers full sun and slightly dry conditions. It can be found growing in fields, pastures, and roadsides. Spiny pigweed, a summer annual. It is frequently seen growing in overgrazed pastures. Pigweed is not generally palatable to horses, but when there are no other plants to choose from, they may consume some. Spiny pigweed can be toxic under certain environmental conditions that stress the plant. Perilla mint, a summer annual. It grows up to 2 feet in height with leaves that are green to purple. Perilla mint is characterized by its mint-like odor. The plant contains ketones that cause animal lung inflammation and impair the exchange of gases involved in breathing. The entire plant is dangerous. Its flowers are most toxic. Perilla mint remains toxic after it dies and when harvested with hay. Burdock, a biennial herb. It requires 2 years to complete its life cycle. The first season's growth results in a rosette of leaves near the soil surface. During the second season, stem elongation occurs. The flowers are purple to lavender, occasionally white, and are sometimes confused with thistle. Buttercup. There are several buttercup varieties. The herb may be perennial, biennial, or annual. The one pictured here is little leaf buttercup, a biennial. Buttercup is frequently found in Virginia's overgrazed pastures. Its presence suggests that there is a soil health problem. Broadleaf plantain, a perennial herb. It grows in basal rosettes that hug the ground. Its leaves die back during the winter, and sprouts occur from a fibrous taproot around mid-spring. Broadleaf plantain is a common pasture weed. Curlydock, a perennial herb. It emerges in mid-spring, flowering from April through July. Curlydock prefers moist soil and can be found in areas that are frequently overwatered, such as near water troughs. It can also be found growing in low-lying areas and ditches. Curlydock can be toxic to horses. Horse nettle, a perennial herb. A member of the nightshade family, it is noted for prickles on the stems and leaves. It develops smooth round berries that look similar to small green or yellow tomatoes. All parts of the plant are toxic, with the berries being most toxic and the roots being least toxic. Its toxicity is reduced after the plant is died and dried. Pokeweed, a perennial herb. It is found in pastures, especially along tree lines or fences. Pokeweed is considered toxic, the roots being most toxic and the berries being least toxic. Mechanical controls. Effective weed management includes more than the use of pesticides. Mechanical controls should be included in every pasture management plan, for it is part of integrated pest management. In short, mechanical controls such as hand pulling, hoeing, mowing, disking, and digging either destroy weeds or make the environment less favorable for seed germination and weed survival. Biological controls are also an integrated pest management tool. Biological controls involve the use of other living organisms, such as insects, diseases, or livestock, for the management of certain weeds. Some limitations of biological controls are they are a long-term undertaking with effects that are neither immediate nor always adequate. The rate of failure for biological controls is often fairly high. Research continues in this area of weed management. Chemical controls, or the use of a herbicide, is also an integrated pest management tool. However, there are a significant number of considerations that must be observed to apply herbicides safely and legally. In short, a herbicide's label is law. Using a herbicide in a manner that is not directed on the label is a violation. Considerations when deciding to use a herbicide include: will it safely control the weed at the current stage of crop or weed growth? Will it interact negatively with other pesticides or fertilizers? Will it leave chemical residue in your fields, hay, or composts? Are you using the appropriate application method? Do you know whether the herbicide requires a surfactant or crop oil? Can it injure non-target plants in an adjacent area? Candidly, if you do not have experience with safely and correctly applying pesticides, it may be best to leave that part of pasture management to a professional or contact your local extension agent first. This slide is the last in the presentation. Here is my contact information. I invite questions by way of email or telephone. Copies of these slides with the transcript are available for teachers and homeschool parents. Thank you very much.